so hopefully we are. I don't know if she's we'll find out, right? Well, we're going to start today. I gave you tests back. There are a few of you who I would like to turn back to me by Wednesday because your personal statement of God stand upon that, because I want you to get as many points out of this test as you can. And I want you to go with a personal statement that is sound for sharing the gospel with children. Okay, so if I gave it back to you, there are a few of you, please back to me on Wednesday. Take it home, look through, see what you want to add to that statement. If you didn't, you're good. Just keep your grades, and I will post all the grades after Wednesday once I get everyone's, and I'm going to update everything. Right? All on the same page? Okay, so today, I just want to welcome the Holy Spirit, the things in our lives. So we welcome you here to give us insight, understanding, and wisdom in Jesus' mighty name. This is a fun day because today we talk about the development. It might sound crazy because even though some of you might feel like you're not in the young adult era anymore, everyone got that? So there are going to be traits that will be familiar to you because it's just the familiar environment in which of human development. We know it's from a secular worldview, right? Well, so is the young adult development. And so, of course, what they're going to emphasize is what young adults look like in the Western world. And I'm going to emphasize that. Because in the Western world, it says, turn 18, leave home, go live a life for yourself. Figure out your college, figure out your education. In every other place besides the Western world, it doesn't work that way. Like, stay at home. Go to a university close to your home. Stay with your parents. Get a job. Then get married, right? So there's so many different dynamics culturally. So I'm very clear to be familiar to your culture, and there are things that are going to work better for different people in their growth and development, right? So we have to be aware of that as we talk to an international group, and I believe relations, right? And so, just like all of our other human growth and development, we want to remember that there are three components to any young adult, right? And those components are right up here: biological age. All of us, whether it's an infant, a baby, a young, early, we know at this point in all of their growth and development, they're going to have a social age. Oops, sorry. Right there. They have a biological age, but we also know by this point, they've been able to integrate in their culture. They've been able to talk and compare themselves to the status quo around them and their cultural norms, and so they have a social age. And then they're also going to have what we call a psychological age. And so we know that this is going to be the individual's ability at this point, through all their years of growth and development, to adapt to an environment and its demands. That adapting could be those who left home and now living by themselves, and what does that demand require? That the social environment of a new college campus, it's not my small high school or my small elementary, it looks different. We try whatever that looks like. But these three components are all going to be at work in the young adult, right? Also, then what we have another term called outcome. This is the view that numerous environmental, social, psychological, and history factors actually now can all play together to create impact. Because now you have history, right? You lived somewhere when you were in elementary school, and maybe you lived there your entire life. My mom and dad are still at the same address that I was born at. Three different places in his entire time. It's been the longest house I've ever lived in. Like, so contrary to me as a kid. We were like here, then there, then now there's history that becomes a factor of how you view things, right? There is this social, we talk about that emotional quotient. How do you feel about yourself? How are you interacting with your social environment, right? There is your psychological, what you're thinking, what you've been taught to thought, how you were discipled as this young teen. All of these things are now very prevalent in who you've become or who you're becoming as this young adult, and they all interact together. You can't separate those things, right? You can't take your history out of you. It's what you grew up with. You can't take your social adapting out of you. It's what you have experienced. It's now, we can always change. We can always grow, and we're going to continue. And we believe that part of the amazing Christianity to grow and change. So who are these young adults? What do they look like? And who are they? Well, first of all, we know that there's this bridge between being an adolescent and what they think is an adult. They don't qualify when you actually become adult. They just know that this is the bridge. You've been this adolescent, and at this point, you're too old to be considered an adolescent, but you're not old enough to be considered an adult. You don't maybe have a full-time job that it needs to carry a house. You don't have the years of experience to know all these things, right? So they don't qualify you as an adult, but you're on the way. So you're this life is a stage where most people enjoy their peak of vitality, strength, and endurance. So we're going to have a look at a few things because of that. Because they say young adults have the peak of their strength and endurance, what are we going to expose them to? And you're going to see most of the time people entering any service. When is it? Those trainings are grueling, right? Let's decide when we're 60 to go join the army. I don't think it's going to happen, right? Different strengths. I'm not saying you don't have strengths. Or where? Right here. They've got this vitality, the growth, development, strength season. And so because of that, education, training, or identify this as your process of life. Sorry, let me get those blanks. And so as culture thinks it's your prime time, what they're going to do is put you through grueling apprenticeships. If you're studying to be a lawyer, you're going to study for hours to get through that bar exam. It's the medical field. You want to pass all your medical exams, and they're working hours and hours to accrue as many hours as they can and get as much exposure, right? If whatever it is, sent to battle. It's intense, right? You have your young athletes, you have the fashion models, and at the same time, this young adulthood that often put this expectation for childbearing because they're young and vital and right. Now, again, I'm going to tell you that there's a Western perspective and an international perspective. Right now, currently, if you're in an educated international perspective, they tell you finish high school, finish here. No, really, there's no rhyme or reason. Young adult, get married, have a baby now, go back to school. Our nation's very school once you've left high school, because high school is an entrance level to any university. So you have to have immediate grades to immediately go in. Hence why they do that. Here, universities can still accept you years later, which is something that I really admire about this culture, because I've seen people follow, change career paths, years, access education immediately after high school. You're not going to get in. You don't get in, you don't get a job. You don't get a job, you don't have income for your family. So the international market for training as a young adult is brutal. And my husband and I were talking about this one day, because both of us grew up in other countries, right? I did my tertiary education here. He first did his in Mexico and then came here. And he graduated valedictorian of his law school. The guy said, I ate, breathed, and lived studying. He said, I refused to drive my car to school because if I got public transportation, I could read the whole way. The school was an hour away from my house. So rather read an hour than drive an hour, right? But as we were talking about this, we were talking about our children's education, right? And we were very diligent parents. We are very diligent parents, and we're going to help them with their education. We're going to give. And at one point, he was like, man, I'm expecting too much from them. Why? And he started to evaluate himself. Why am I expecting so much from them? Then he said, I realized it was because so much was expected from us. You're growing up in a nation that unless you get an education, you're going to have no income for your family. And it's intense. In high school, you're already having to think where you're going to go, what you're going to do, what you're going to study, because you don't have an education, you don't have an income for your family. Internationals agree with me that are out there? So this pressure for you to do well at school is intense. And he said, I didn't repent. I realized I put too much pressure on my kids. Here, I believe I can help them create a business that they excel in. Here, I believe whatever their dream is, I can figure out a way to help them. A total different environment. Whether they go to college immediately after or not, it's not going to cripple them for life. Our nations, it's not that way. You don't do it right after high school. You don't get your entrance in. You don't have that opportunity. We have only 10 people can take this class. You're not one of them. So sad. You've got to figure out something else, and you don't get the career path you wanted and the thing you excel in, and you just have to settle for something else that you didn't even want to do. And then you all of that career path, you don't have the economic ability to then go back to school again. They don't have that option. You don't work and go to school. That's the other thing in our nation. You go to school. It's like all day. You don't get a second job and go to school. You don't get the grade to finish. You're out that semester. So sad to bad. So you're like, man, I have to go to school as a young adult. I cannot work. And I admire young adults who do that because I'm like, that's amazing. But it's so different. So we were realizing the pressure we were expecting of our own kids was because of a cultural experience we had. And we had to change our point of view and say, it's okay. God's got them. And they're not living in the culture we lived in. They're not living under the pressure we had. Not that we undermine or now have less expectation for them, but we were having to evaluate why was it such a strong core value for us, right? Because you're in a place that there's no other healthy jobs. That's how your family is going to survive, right? And so we had to stop and say, you know what? We're in a different place, in a different era, and a different state for their benefit. How can we best help them excel in who they are, not in what we had to experience? That's what you do, right? We value our experience because God's sovereign. He knows where you're going to be born and who you're going to be born to. Two elements of your life you can never, ever change. Sovereignly God. He said, you're going to be born there, and these are your parents. No factor in that you could ever change or influence, right? So he knew those things. And so it's just really interesting for us to stop and evaluate. And that's why I say the nations is such a difference right here. Young adults often are centered on their career and their relationships. Because right now, what they have time to do is study, apply themselves to that kind of career, and whatever time's left over, they want to build a relationship with other young adults. They want to have friends. They want to be in a relationship with them. How many of you agree that? You go to school and then you want to find friends. Yes, right? For some of these young adults, it's definitely testing your skill and establishment of your independence and identity. Right? How independent can you be, and who do you really identify as? And so, this is when they say there is the second greatest exodus from the church. Because these young adults leave their families and say, goodbye, I'm not going to attend your church. I'm going to my college over here. And they don't know their identity. I'm going to just be honest. So they get into binge drinking. They'll drink all night and try to go to school. They knew they could never do that in their parents' house, but they never really had their own relationship with Jesus. So now my identity is not really connected to that anymore. What is my identity? I know, I'm going to go search it, right? They get involved in these groups. Young girl that I know just went to university. And I'm like, how did you get involved in the LGBT? Oh, because I heard them and I thought they were speaking great. And I had many conversations. She's not changing her view. And I'm thinking, I went to college. What happened to you? Right? No, she's picked up this identity. This is who she's going to be. And it's not even that she wants a same gender relationship. She wants transgender. I'm going to change. I'm like, don't go there. No. And she's even changed her name. She sent me this whole message. And then when I started to address her identity, she said, I don't need to hear any more things, and has never messaged me back again. Because I was not going all these things. I was talking to her identity. All of those things are just flighty things. What is the core element? It's the identity. So when I started to tell her who she is and what her identity is, she cut the conversation off completely. Oh, I don't want to hear that. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to stop speaking truth, and I'm not going to stop calling you who you are. Even though you tell me, call me by this name. No, I'm not going to call you by that name. This is who you are. This is who God created you to be. This is his plan for you. She didn't want that. So I know, I left the door open. I said, hey, if you have any time, any questions, any prayer, I'm still here. I'm going to shut the door. But this was from identity, need for identity and relationship finds wrong relationship and wrong identity. All over young adults, right? So they say, prepare your teens. And they say the strongest way to overcome an exodus and really have identity and independence in your young adults is that throughout your church experience, whether they kids, children, or teenagers, they did a study that if there are significant people other than their parents in the church environment who know their name and their faith development and help them, not always just accountable in terms of like a bad way, but coaching and how are you today? How should we be? Have you been able to read the Bible? What was God speaking to you about? They said when there is that significant person that they can name, they have found that the exodus has completely been reduced nearly to nothing, and those young adults go and get involved in a church wherever they study because of one significant person in their life who was interested in their spiritual development. And that's why, although we have mega church, which is amazing, within the mega church, there has to be small group elements. I have to have my name known by someone. Someone has to call me by name when I get to church and recognize me. If I'm just part of a crowd, it's not going to work. So whether you're in small church, whether you're in big church, you have to have significant relations. It's not different between big or small church. It's that someone knows you by name, knows your faith walk, and asks how your faith walk is going. Makes you feel significant and that someone really cares. Someone else is praying for me, right? So they did study and they actually proved that changed the Exodus status. Not only that, play a less important role influencing an individual's decision and lifestyle. That's what I was just trying to share with you. While their peers seem to be more important in their personal identity. So you have children with strong identity, you know what you're going to have? You know, young adults choosing great friends who help them in their identity. And that's the goal here. Help them in their identity, right? Just have to share this because of identity. It has nothing to do with young adults, but still has to do with what you believe, right? Had this amazing conversation with my 11-year-old about music, right? These girls at school, they were asking me, well, what music do you listen to? And before I could answer, she said, oh, don't tell me. You just listen to all that Christian stuff. And then she went on to say, da, 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 da. And he said, you know what? I wasn't offended. She didn't offend me by her comment. I was very hurt the way she talked about God. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't about me that she's like, what music you listen to, da, da. It's the way she talked about God. I'm like, good. Wow. He realized it's not about me. Cuss words and blah, 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 about the music. And he said, she doesn't even know. I don't even think she's listened to it to even know. And she's just already categorized. And yet, she calls herself a Christian. So I the way she talked about God. I was like, for an 11-year-old to comprehend that, I was like, Lord, you use my children to teach me every day, right? Oh, I'm not offended. I'm not offending me. I know what I'm going to believe. The way she talked about my God, that offended me. That's the core backbone. And this, all of a sudden, many times he'll tell me, I feel like I don't have a lot of friends. I feel like I need more friends. I'll say, why? Because I can really be a friend with that one because this, and he understands, he's standard. Sometimes I'm like, it's okay, I believe you can influence them. So I'm confident you could. But he himself recognizes an 11-year-old can understand who really loves Jesus and who doesn't, who's really mocking, who doesn't, but he still has a need for wanting to connect with others, right? And so I had to exhort him because his name was John. He wasn't, I'm intentionally naming him John, not John the Beloved, but John the Baptist. Dad called you John the Baptist because you're going to stand out. And you just showed me your courage to stand up and not be afraid of what she said. Because that's who God's calling you to be. That was the intention of your name. I think he's realizing the weight of his own calling. I believe that's his calling. Because then he says to me, I'm going to start a movement. And he's not the loud of the two brothers. He's the quiet. But I'm going to start a movement. Okay? It's going to be a peace movement. He tells me, so what's your cause? I don't have a cause. No, I don't have a cause yet. Oh God, about it. But those things, put them, have accountability, talk those things through, have those conversations, right? Let the conversation be there because this young adult needs their identity. They didn't get it suddenly as a young adult. It was seeded the entire time to be who they're going to be, right? See that people in this age bracket, parents, oh, sorry, okay, right there, 6 is parents and peers. Number 7, people in this age bracket begin to form their adult lives and structure themselves. Something that's amazing about this stage in life is that it's like endless possibility. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Right? It's dreaming. Go to the mission field. Go on the missions trip. Try out KFN. Endless possibilities. Go see what your skill set is. Go try and see where you're good at, right? Because in the stage of life, they're not committed to be responsible for others. Once there's a wife and there's children, and you feel responsible on all of your adventuring, right? Now you're taking a whole lot, many more lives and accountable for many more lives in the decisions you're making. So young adults, it's an endless possibility for you to dream what God wants to do with you. And it's a wonderful thing to do. Step into it, try. There's many times lower long-range planning. Because what you're planning is just to get enough income to enroll for the spring semester, right? That's kind of short range in terms of goals. You don't have a 5-year goal. In 5 years from now, I'm going to be here doing this, doing that, right? No, you're just like, my goal is just to have enough to go put it down to enroll for next semester. How many of you agree with me? My goal is just to have enough to, because of this type and the stage and the place we're at. Temporariness, meaning right now you're going to school, you're trying to work all the rest of your life. It's a temporary time, right? And you have the strength to apply yourself because you know it's temporary. It's for the next 2, the next 3 years. I can do this, right? But after that, you're going to engage in full-time ministry or get a job and do ministry part-time. There's going to be a different kind of economic steadiness as opposed to now, which is temporary, because everything's temporary, right? So what are things that are affecting these young adults? First of all, we know that this parent-child relationship is in transition, right? And many times it's navigating how to be more. You'll never not be a child, and you'll never not be a parent. It's going to be eternal. But how do I transition that into respecting each other, honoring each other, still communicating, and not independence, but rather interdependence. Independence says, I'm on my own, I don't need you, I can do it by myself. Independence says, I still trust you, I still look to you, I still connect with you. Maybe you don't tell me everything I have to do, but I still honor. Do you see the difference between independence and interdependence? The goal for young adults should be interdependence, where there still is relationship because they're your parents. But again, this is Western worldview and this is secular study. Young adults feel they're too old to live with their parents and they're ready for their own identity. Young adults might acknowledge their needs and impulse. They know what to do and they know how to get it done. This is what's amazing about young adults. And I want to always teach this unit with the understanding that many of you are going to work with. You're going to have all different kinds of adults as your volunteers. You're going to want some young adults, but young adults are not the only volunteers you want. You're going to want some olden goldies, the prayer warriors, the grandma is willing to cut out all the craft supplies for you, but you can't only run with them, right? You want the parents, but they're overwhelmed and they're so busy and they're great with kids. But you need a mix of all these different adult stages to really have an amazing dynamic with the wisdom, right? This is why we partner, because they think they got the energy, they know how to do it, they're going to get it done. They might not always. There's other things that I need to consider. These are families, and maybe their time's not as quick, and they're like, why aren't they around? Where should they be? Just because. So we need to partner their strength with the other strength of, yes, you know how to get it done. You can do it. You have the energy, the vitality, and the strength. These ones here have the in which to do it, right? So sometimes the zeal of the using of the rest of the things. Wayne Myers once said that a young man that was from the stage in the Ivy. It's like, yeah, young men have nothing to preach but this. But really, he was saying that the lifetime experience, the walk with the Lord, that because they're young, they haven't experienced it. And so he was speaking such wisdom in those. Everyone knows Wayne Myers, right? Adults. They're trying to figure out what is their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Even here, you guys chose School of Children Family Ministry probably because you know your strength. You're not going to go choose one of the schools that's your weakness, right? I did not choose School of Worship. I don't know that it's my strength. I go to where my strength is, and I'm going to people along who have a strength where I don't. So we're going to form a strong team, right? Young adults are forming their own identity. There is a great need for their interdependence as opposed to independence. I already spoke to that. At this point, young adults need to learn to accept who they are. Teenagers are struggling to figure out, they really wanted to be chosen for that basketball. Why not? Well, the coach didn't see the ability that they thought they had, right? And really, maybe they're amazing artists, but they really were driving to be with all those who were chosen for basketball, right? And it can be a big trauma and a big challenge for a team because they weren't chosen for that team. By the time you come to the young adult, you know what? I am better at art, and that's okay. I enjoy basketball and I'll play it recreationally, but I'm okay that my gifting really isn't art. But many of our teens are still struggling through this acceptance of who I am, and as soon as they actually have to discover it. We've told children when we train them, because we often do creative arts things. You cannot say no until you've tried it. You cannot say, no, I cannot dance and I cannot move until you've tried to be in the piece, until you've tried it. And that's the same with our teenagers. You have to expose them to try. Once they've tried it, they need to move on. But they cannot limit themselves before they've even tried it out. And they're okay with accepting the gifts, the talents, and the ability that God's given them. And now they begin to ask, how can I use what God's given me? Can I apply what I have, right? We also know that right here, they are learning to live in new surroundings, right? And as I said, you'll be kind of able to connect to some of these even if you're not a young adult because you're on a college campus. You all had to learn to live in a new environment right here. This is where you live on campus. Most probably there's going to be some financial security that you're not in your parents' house, you're taking care of all the bills. Now, if you can choose to stay at home and you can choose to be a blessing there, that might look a little different, right? They take charge of their own space and their own lifestyle, meaning you're responsible here to clean up your apartments, and then they come and do inspection, right? Because they're expecting you to have cleaned up your space. It's not mom and dad cleaning your space for you anymore. You're taking care of your lifestyle and your space. They try to help you with lifestyle because they have curfew, right? Trying to say, look, this is a healthy lifestyle. This is what time you should be cutting it off at night so that you can be ready for the next day. They tried to subtly show you that these are healthy things that we're implementing for you because you're on this campus. Now, there might be campuses that are not Christ for the Nations. And maybe those are not their rules and those are not their regulations. And they even have more reason to take care of their own space and their own lifestyle because no one's really implementing that for them, right? With these young adults, we know that this is their need. They need freedom to step into the world. They want to explore all possibilities. That's why we say, make sure before you leave Christ for the Nations, you've experienced a KFN or a YFN. We give you all these student ministry opportunities. Go see what it is to do prison ministry. Go see what it is to feed the homeless. Go and, try it, see it. None of it's going to be wrong. It's just exposure, and you're going to find what really kind of you excel in and what you really enjoy. And of course, they want opportunity to make independent choices. In our cognitive development of our young adults, we're going to see that psychologists have speculated that there is a higher level of thought, and it's going to follow formal operational thought, right? This formal operational thought, or this higher level of thought that follows formal operational thought, is now going to be called post-operational. Post-formal operational thought. And these are the three things that govern this level of cognitive development. First thing is that the young adult is going to realize that there are no absolutes. When we were teaching the children and we were in concrete operational thought, they had to see it, they had to touch it, they had to count the blocks for the addition problem. Now, from that abstract, well, the possibility, right? Remember, formal operational thought was the entrance of abstract thought. So we could make this chemical reaction, we could do this hypothetical math problem. Now, when we leave formal operational thought, we're going to post, which says it has an absolute. Where does this lead to? This leads to postmodern man, right? This leads to all of the worldviews that are in process right now. What's good for you is not good for me. What's good for me is not good for you. You can believe what you want. I'll believe for. Can you see this? Universities are full of postmodern man thinking. And so your young adults are going to be highly influenced by the worldview with which their instructors teach. Because there's no longer an absolute for anyone. We know they're absolutes. The greatest absolute is the Bible. The greatest absolute is the nature of God. He's not going to change. The greatest absolute is that man has sinned short of the glory of God, but Jesus died and we're forgiven. Those are unchanging absolutes. They're going to want to argue against. They're going to want to reason against. They're going to want to try and shake because they believe there's no absolutes anymore, right? Young adults begin to accept and understand that they're contradictions. That you're going to maybe believe this is or your research is going to contradict my research, right? That's why we have research schools and research units and all these things, because we don't know. And yet, in the midst of these contradictions, they're learning they can exist neutrally in a compatible system of knowledge. So maybe our information contradicts each other, but I can still neutrally exist with you in my classroom, believing something different, right? Can you see this on a university campus? Yes? And then young adults are going to recognize that their experience is going to help them organize all these, whether it's contradictions, whether it's information, whatever it is. Because my absolute says this, I believe it contradicts you here because this is what I've experienced, right? You say that there's not only one true God, that there are many gods. I say there was one God changing my life. It is now contradicting what you believe, but I'm not changing that because I've experienced a personal interaction with a living God, right? So can you see how that's now the place of cognitive development for our young adults? We also want to know that there's a model for cognitive development for young adults. Very interesting, and I really like it. It was proposed by Kleinfeld-Kemp, which if you can go look it up if you want, but he said there were 4 components to the young adult cognitive development. And so these were that the young adult went from sorry, I'm not keeping on the same pace as you. Apologize, I'm not looking at it today because I'm trying to be right here at the screen. But if you just want to get those blanks, structure and experiential, it's going to be here. So what they have structure, they have diversity, they have experiential learning, and they have personalism all interacting. Think about Christ for the Nations. There's a structure in our school, 8 to 12. They give you a curfew, right? However, have you not experienced the most diversity in your life? Here, there's students from all over the nations. They have diverse culture. They have diverse, just everything, food, everything. Now, other universities might even be a different. We're all in a Christian worldview, right? And theirs might not. So the diversity could even be greater because they all come with different worldviews, right? And then experiential learning. The school was, when Lindsay started the school, he said, we needed to train ministers with experience, laying hands on the sick, being filled with the Holy Spirit. You do a student ministry for the experiential learning. CF and I would not be the same if you did not have that. You don't even realize how strong that component is until you leave school. And you'll be like, oh, I remember when I did this. Because when you do it, you learn it. When you do it, you remember it. When you do it, it becomes part of how you're going to use it. And then personalism. You chose what school you wanted to be in. You're going to express your project in your own way, right? Everyone, I gave you genogram. Whether you want it big, whether you want it small, it's up to you. You could express how you want it. Now, you in elementary school, kids, I want it on this board, this space, these are da, right? So you put that right here. And with this, they express that you are going from more structure to less structure. High school had more, you're going to less. At the same time, you're going from less diversity to more diversity, which probably your high schools and places of education was your little community. And wherever your parents chose to live is how your community looked, right? So you were used to that diversity. But once you move into a bigger tertiary training place for young adults, the diversity is from all over that we now bringing diversity, right? from low involvement in learning to high. So in elementary, high school, teachers stand up, lecture, tell you, do homework, you go home, you bring it back. Now, just explained, you have student ministry, but in regular university, you're going to have labs where you go to the lab and you execute, you actually participate in dissecting the frog or whatever lab you've joined, the science lab. But many of these things are going to have a lab. You're going to have the lecture in the lab because you have to have experiential learning, right? Or an internship. They're going to require you to go do an internship because that's what they want. You'll also find that you're going to have prior in high school, I shouldn't have missed that. You'll have moderate amounts of personal expression. University, how do you want to express yourself? What does your art want to look like, right? High school, we still have criteria to the art. University, depending on your worldview, it's how your art's going to look, right? Some of the art you don't want to look, because now it's your personal expression. So whatever in their heart, whatever's in their perspective, whatever they're thinking, they get to express. And it's not going to be right or wrong. It's that you use the medium and the texture, and that's fine. But whatever your expression is, it's going to be acceptable, because now you have huge personalism. Do we see how this dynamic is working with our young adults? We will end with this part to pick up for Wednesday. But there's also relational development, right? And so what's happening in these places of relationship? Well, Erickson was the one who was helping us to see relationship. If you remember, where it was shame versus autonomy and those kind of independence and growth elements, Erickson was very much about relationship development. So he said there is a stage for young adults, and he would say that it would be intimacy versus isolation. Have you been able to connect and find someone that you're going to be intimate with, or are you isolated, don't know how to connect, and haven't developed that social skill yet? And with this, he said there's 5 different intimate interactions that a young adult might show. Again, I'm going to emphasize that this is from a secular worldview, because again, we have standards as a college. We know that universities, not only is it binge drinking, but then how many multiple boyfriends have you been with? Where have you slept, right? So that's all a secular worldview. We don't believe that. We don't follow that worldview. But intimate style of relationships, forming and maintaining a long love relationship, pre-intimate style, mixed emotions about the commitment. Should I be with this person? Shouldn't I be with this person? Is the person that's best for me? Stereotyped, which many times are superficial relationships, usually with same gender but not really deep. You only know them because you're in the same class together. Hi, how are you, Sally? Yeah, normally same gender but superficial, not very deep. You're not going to carry you through life. It's just you were in the same class together, so you got familiar, you sat with them, you chatted with them, but outside of your class, there's nothing much more to that relationship, right? There will be pseudo-intimate, long-lasting sexual relationship without without depth or closeness. And then there will be the isolated style, which is shying away from any social relationship or having very little or no friends. So they're dealing with all of these on a relational level. Which relational level am I? Am I expected? Where should it be, right? These levels of relationship have maturity in them. One can be a very self-focused type level of relationship, or else a very role-focused relationship, or else a very individuated, which is a connected level. So in the midst of all these relationships, is it that you're in this relationship, but you're just in it to get out what you can because you don't know all the answers for the test, so you just get a friend this person because you see that you don't know the answers, you go on. Self-focused. Another one would be role-focused, okay? We're in this relationship because we're in a small group together, and I'm your small group leader. And this is my role. Or individuated, which means I really want to be here in this group. I want to be with you. I want to connect. let's be on a connected level. Can you see that in the midst of the relationship, there's different levels with which you must probably connecting in that relationship, right? We're going to end right there because that's young adults, but we'll pick it up on Wednesday and continue with that. Reminder, if I gave you your test back to bring back, to add to your salvation statement, bring that back to me on Wednesday so I can finish up all those grades. Some people, yours was fine. Some people got their tests back and were asked to turn it back in, adding more to their gospel statement. If I did not write that on your page, you're fine. Your gospel statement was fine. Don't bring it back. I think it's like 5 papers I need back. Good?